Deontay Wilder is an interesting one at the minute. He's been in quite a few articles today in the boxing press. Wilder now 30-0 with 30 knockouts. Recently defeated former Tyson Fury victim Nikolai Furfer, knocking him down multiple times in the course of the fight, and I think stopping him at either the fourth or the fifth round in the end. There's been a lot of chat about who Deontay's next opponent is, and really sort of what stage he's at. And today there's been a few developments on where he stands and who it looks like he's going to be likely in against next time out. I think the major thing is Deontay Wilder is quite highly rated amongst the WBC. I think what his people had been hoping was that Vitaly Klitschko would vacate his belt, and then would probably, there'd be a title fight between number one contender Bermane Stiverne and Deontay himself to decide who the new title holder would be. It very much appears now that is not the case, despite reports that Vitaly Klitschko even will be running for president of the Ukraine. It very strongly appears now that he will box again, and I'm expecting an announcement in the next week naming who his opponent will be. I think given the fact that he hasn't had a title defence for over a year, and I don't think he's done a mandatory for nearly 2 years now, I'm expecting that my quite confident vote would be that he'll be up against number one contender ranked by the WBC, who is Bermane Stiverne. So I think that probably takes what was deemed to be Deontay's most likely opponent out of the fray. I think we're probably looking at Vitaly versus Stiverne, quarter one, quarter two of the new year, and that means that Deontay Wilder would be looking to position himself to fight the winner in either a mandatory title or in a voluntary, due to what he can bring to the table with his name and fan base. I think the names that have been mooted today outside of Stiverne are Tony Thompson and Malik Scott. Now, I think these guys do have a few bonuses in what they bring to the table, in the sense that they're both American heavyweights. So Deontay wouldn't have to travel. If he came and had to fight someone like Kubrat Pulev in Europe, or if he had to fight someone like Derek Chisora in Great Britain, it causes problems with him being away from home and such. If he got one of those guys, he could fight on in American soil, not have to travel, that sort of thing. They're also, both of them have got good records. Tony Thompson, obviously the bigger name, recent victories over David Price, caused Kubrat Pulev a few style problems. Did put up a decent performance against Klitschko himself. I think Tony Thompson is the bigger name of the two. I think that both of them would be a step up in the opposition Wilder's face. Both of those names, Scott and Thompson, are certainly a move in the right direction in terms of named fighters and quality of fighters. I do have some slight concern, however, whether Wilder will get through them. I think he's got a better chance. I rate Thompson higher than I rate Scott. I think they're both decent, but I'm a bit of a Tony Thompson fan. I think Thompson, in a way, could be all wrong for Wilder. He's another tall guy who would try and keep the fight at range to an extent. Stylistically, he's a very tricky, awkward fighter. We saw the trouble that he's caused heavyweights. He won the first few rounds against Pulev due to his boxing awkwardness. He certainly performed better than expected against Vladimir Klitschko in their first fight, just to sort of stylistic problems. And being a southpaw, we found out he was all wrong for David Price. Thompson, despite having a bit of a reputation of not being a puncher, has a very high win ratio and a very high knockout ratio, and he stopped David Price in both of their fights. And with there being definite questions about Deontay Wilder's chin, I certainly think that Tony Thompson is a dangerous fight for him. I like Malik Scott as a fight for Deontay, just because Malik Scott hasn't got much of a punch. He seems to lack power completely, and that might bode well with Deontay's supposed lack of a chin. I think Deontay would beat Malik Scott, but I think Malik Scott might expose him by winning a few of the early rounds and just proving too tricky and potentially outclassing Deontay Wilder in the boxing sense. Obviously, I think it's very likely that first time Deontay lands on him, it'll be game over. So I prefer the Malik Scott fight, but I think both of them are possibly wrong for Deontay Wilder, in that they're both stylistic, they're both awkward, tactical guys who might outclass him in a boxing sense. I preferred the idea of Deontay Wilder going in against somebody a bit less mobile, someone like Areola, someone like an Alexander Povetkin type fighter, someone who is going to trade, is going to take punches, and who is likely not going to, expose Wilder's lack of a chin and lack of great boxing ability. It is more going to fall victim again to his power. I thought that would be the more sensible route in terms of him fighting a bigger name. I think Malik Scott and Tony Thompson are both risks. I'd probably have Thompson beating Wilder. I'd probably have Scott losing, but making him look flawed, if that makes sense. So, interesting that they've gone down this route. Funnily, I'd probably view, out of the three of them, I'd probably view Stavern to be the best matched opponent for Wilder. I rate Stavern, but he's slightly less mobile. He's got more of a sort of, he's half a boxer, half a brawler, if you like. But I think Wilder would probably find that an easier fight in many senses than against Thompson and against Scott. So I was a bit concerned for him when I read that. Obviously, very, very interesting that Vitaly Klitschko will be out again. One would presume that he's going to be in against Stavern, given his mandatory obligations, but the WBC seem to be so compliant with what he wants that you never know. You never know who he'll go in against. It'd be great if he went in against the winner of Fury Hay. That would be a wonderful sort of spectacle. But I think that's less likely. I think he'll have to go down the mandatory route. Maybe he goes down the mandatory route, beats Stavern, and then sets up a match with the winner of Fury Hay for sort of summertime next year. But obviously that would leave Deontay Wilder out in the sidelines. But there's still time for Deontay yet. But I thought it was interesting that it looks like it's going to be Scott or Thompson next for Wilder, and I think both of those are going to be really tricky opponents for him. I think rightly they're stepping him up in class and putting him in finally against someone who may be able to cause him some problems. You'd think they would in his 31st fight, and with him being so highly ranked. But I think that Tony Thompson is all wrong for him, and I think that Tony could find him out just like he found David Price out, and if he does do a job on him like he did in David Price, Deontay's going to find himself in a similar position where he's written off, and he'll no longer pose a credible threat to the Klitschkos, because everyone will know if he's getting beaten by Tony Thompson, he's not going to have too much of a chance in against the Ukrainians. But no, I'd be really interested to hear people's thoughts on how they rank Deontay against Malik Scott and against Tony Thompson. How do they see the result of those two fights going? I'd also be interested to hear what people think the best next fight is for him. I mean, presumably he's not going to go in against Klitschko. Presumably he's now not going to get Stavern. So who would you match him up with? Do you agree with my analysis that a Chris Areola type or a Seth Mitchell type perhaps would be a better match for him rather than Thompson and Wilder? And how would you match him next? Thanks very much for watching.